It is the Final Word Cricket Podcast, Season 17, Episode 14, back at Victoria Park, where we recorded Storytime 210 yesterday.
Yes.
Didn't anticipate recording 2 episodes here, but it was so well received, Geoff, that Storytime ep that we put up by Stumps yesterday. People tended to appreciate our reflections on suburban football and Jack Ryder.
All your reflections. I mean, I don't think I have as much to offer in that space.
But I think there was a sense of this as being a nice part of the history of the city that we're from, and given that I'm off
to do a whole series, we'll have to do Arden Street, we'll have to do the Whitten Oval.
I'd love that, actually. We should go and record one up in, I think the Michael Tuck's down at Glenferrie Oval's been condemned for the time being, but the Birrendara Council has been committed to fixing it. So there are places we could do this kind of thing. So thanks to those who got in touch. It's a big weekly show today. Of course, we've still got the Board of Gavaskar, and the dailies will cover most of that, but a little bit of news between Test matches, Test cricket around the World Test Championship implications. Jay Shah is officially in the chair at the ICC. The Women's Big Bash, a huge weekend of women's sport here in Melbourne, but that's been run and won at the Melbourne Cricket Ground. Plenty more besides. As we start to work our way into it. One more thing about the location. I ran past someone a couple of days ago in Clifton Hill who said, "Oh, Colo, love the Final Word." And I had my headphones on and I was quite rude, not intentionally, but I kind of went, "Oh, yeah, hi." If that was you, thank you and sorry for being a bit unintentionally dismissive.
That's it's like the Princess Park guy I told you about who just ran past me and went, "Final Word," and just kept running.
Yeah.
But
just felt like that guy. He had really nice long hair. That's all I remember about him, young fella.
Okay.
But at the time, I thought he looked like my mate Dara from university. Then I clocked it afterwards. Dara's my age, so he can't look like a young bloke. He'd be 40 as well.
No,
so
it's like
it's not him.
It's like me being in Home Alone, that thing where I'm like, that guy's 70 years old.
Sterney's old.
Like he was my age when he made that film in 1990. The time has moved. Things have not stood still.
Sort of along the lines of things that we might have done as kids. How about, before we get into the real conversation today, Shame or Monopoly? This is it's Christmas season, Geoff. We spoke a little bit about retail sales yesterday.
Yeah.
But the pieces that you're familiar with Monopoly, they've been replaced by like a piece of pizza.
Would be
the ball in Warnie's hand. Set of stumps, some playing cards.
Very detailed. Have they got
poker.
like a cast of his hands?
It's like the Murali,
like the Warren Murali, the creepiest trophy in the world.
It's just like
disembodied
that.
Hands,
and all the cards that document moments of his life, like the community chest, which has got. It does pretty good at leaning into the piss take bits. Like you're out for 99.
Yeah.
There's one about
you're out for 99. Daniel Vittori's overstepped, but nobody's noticed.
Yeah. Emergency baked bean delivery has arrived.
Okay.
So it's all going. I mean, it's $99, which I have no idea whether that's good value. What I do know is that if I were a kid, I would desperately want that for Christmas. It's all part of the Shame On Foundation or Legacy.
Yeah.
Shame On Legacy, right? Is the research into
two things.
heart disease.
The pieces should be like a pack of darts, a phone open to Tinder, etc. rather than. But also and this may or may not be true, but I can't imagine him having the patience to play Monopoly. I can't imagine he got through many games of Monopoly. I know he was a poker player, but something about that just seems like it doesn't ring true for me.
Yeah. Well, didn't he say he'd never read a book, including his own, one of the books that he'd had done for him at some point. So, that would sort of line up. But in saying that, some long nights at the poker table could have equipped him for long nights of Monopoly. I hope he didn't sort of flip the board, which is the kind of thing that the guy we were talking about yesterday, Frederick Beauchamp.
Beauclerk.
I kind of assumed because of the E would be
I reckon he's because it's kind of Frenchy English, it's like
Beauclerk.
Norman French Beauclerk.
Anyway,
that's
all on Storytime 210. Which, by the way, Dino's 210. We went scrambling around trying to find a 210, and we were getting plenty of grief about. Hang on, what about Dean Jones at Madras?
We should be sacked, basically. Also, Kyle Mayers. Kyle Mayers, 210, the debut 100, his first 100.
What was his debut?
The fourth innings chase, the Bangladesh debut. So there were plenty of good 210s that we should be sacked for not remembering.
And we talk about the Windies and Bangladesh, the thrilling test match that's taking place right now at Jamaica later in the show. Let's start with our final word game to round off our introductory segment today. We did play against the Royal Park Reds. It had a great day on Sunday. Miraculously got on despite all the rain on the weekend. Parkville did a great job of getting the pitch up, covering it on Friday night, but leaving the covers on until Sunday morning. And getting the ground prepared. It was spicy, but we managed to stay on despite 2 rain delays and running the risk of ruining their square. Tom Brennan, who runs the show there at Parkville, was a terrific host, and we got over the line. And Geoff, maybe you can sum it up in 30 seconds.
In 30 seconds, yes, spicy deck. There was a lot of grass on it, some wet patches. It was doing all sorts. They won the toss and batted and could barely score off the first 10 overs or so. Conrad French unplayable. And then, they managed to get going a little bit through the second half, got the way up to 92, and it was a challenging score. I'll tell you what, we were 30 off the first 10 overs.
Right,
and then you and Ben Rennick managed to get a few, hit a couple over the ropes and get things moving along enough that that Tambo, who was there, who was the last out last year in the run chase that didn't quite get there, was able to see it home this year with Conrad, who'd opened the bowling so well. I can't fit it all into 30 seconds, but Thomas Miles bowled beautifully with the newish ball. Jack Jorgensen opened the batting and the bowling and bowled really nicely up top as well. And those seamers were just hitting a length, and it was doing bloody heaps. Leaving the 30 seconds behind, like you said, big thanks to Parkville just for letting us run around on that square and risk doing some damage to it when it was pretty wet out there. And to Reggie and the Reds for getting us on and then having us back at the Vic Hotel afterwards. But, my player of the day has to go to Sheepy from the Reds, who goes, no, I don't take the new ball anymore. Came on, bowled about 4th change and was unplayable. He bowled 2 overs to you and John O'Haley that were just seaming all over the place. I was umpiring at this point, and that ball was decking in, decking away. No one could lay bat on it, and you're like, just don't get out to this guy because he will take 4 for. If he gets one of you two, he will take another 3 or 4.
There was no way I was laying bat on any of those, no. So that's okay. It was good to be up against the guy that's clearly played a pretty high level of cricket.
I think he still plays ones.
So
he was bowling off. He was bowling off 3 steps in order to be merciful, but landing on that pitch, it was doing all sorts.
That was fun. For about 5 minutes, it felt like a proper serious game of cricket. But to reiterate your point about Reggie and the Reds who had us back there and put on the beers and put on the food and that type of thing at the Vic Hotel in Brunswick. So thanks to them for being great. We're going to do a little. Maybe cup or plate or something. We'll put a plaque on for each year, and make it when something happens twice. It's a tradition.
That's
so now
Australia.
It's an annual thing. It'll be a tradition playing against the Royal Park Reds. Who have you missed here? Ben Rennick's 2 catches out in the deep. One of which was in your wickets in consecutive balls, which was a highlight of itself. So a great catch from Ben in the deep, and then the dance and bowled second ball from the left-hander they had for them, who did the ball bounce twice before hitting the stumps. I mean, it did, but was he beyond the ball?
He'd run well past it by that point.
So there was a debate.
Morally, that's fine.
Yeah, that's right. Morally, it was out because he ran past it before the ball bounced the second time.
Didn't hit it. That is true. I didn't mention that I was on a hat trick for the first time in my life.
And the one caught out in the deep by Ben off you was when. As the ball was going down there, the great Sonny Munn, Melbourne Identity, was umpiring. And as the ball was going down, he's gone, that's at the back of his hand. And so it was.
It was the wrong
one.
It actually pitched. It turned in. And our friend went with the spin and hit it out to deep mid and got caught. And then the next one was bowled middle stump. And then the hat-trick ball was off the pitch. And then so we got to bowl it again. And then it was hit in the air through mid-wicket, not too far from the catcher. I wasn't far away.
Yeah, not far at all. So, great day. Great to do those types of things. First time you and I have been in a winning final word game together. I think that means of the 15 games we've played, we've won 13 or something like that. So we're going okay.
We've lost 2.
It looks like there's going to be
won and tied the rest.
4 games in 4 days in the UK in August across a couple of different countries. So
it's a first-class fixture, effectively.
Well,
it'll be a 4-day game.
I don't think we'll get away with quite doing that, but there are some exciting things in the works for the UK branch of the Final Word 11.
Yep, I'll say well done to Andrew Pellicati, who bowled nicely with his left arm. Spin and Thilo Fobbs, our German import, who had the long sleeves on and needed them, but he did bowl nicely and he did turn it.
As I said, he used every one of those 15 degrees available to him. So, well bowled, Thilo, our favourite German. Geoff, into the proper agenda today. The first news I thought we should discuss is that Ian Redpath, the former Australian batter who played 68 test matches and a handful of one-day internationals in a really interesting time in Australian cricket from 1963 through until the late 70s, has passed away at age 83. Australian Cricket Hall of Fame, an icon of his era for his stern, disciplined batting, also the ability to take it to opposing attacks. There were some great clips of him taking on the Windies short bowling in his pomp as well, but a name that's synonymous with Victorian cricket and Australian cricket, and of a generation that gets reflected upon so fondly even now 40 or 50 years later.
And I think a big thing about Ian Redpath for me is that he's basically Ian Chappell's favourite player.
Yep.
I mean, there's Les Favell, who's the one he looks up to when Chappell's coming through, but of the players he plays with, Ian Redpath is the one that, Redders is the one that Chappelli brings up most often with the greatest fondness. I think he had so much regard for him, and that carries some weight with me. And then Ian Redpath's role as being a catalyst for World Series cricket, really, where it's on the tour where he asks to have a bit of compensation from the cricket board for having to shut his shop for a few months to go on tour. Bradman refuses. Redpath doesn't tour, and Ian Chappell is so incensed by this that's really the spur that makes him go, no, bugger these guys. We will take the Packer invitation and do our own thing. So he plays an important part with just how valued he was in that side, and how much in Ian Chappell's side they wanted him there as a rock to build their batting around.
Yeah, it's quite remarkable. The vice captain of the Australian team, which he was after 74-75, which is again there's a book that's just been released about 74-75 that at some point will probably feature on Book Club, that's been getting nice reviews. Like that's the Lily Tomo series, right? And Redpath's vice captain there, and then one season on in 1975 decided to stay put at home. Gideon Haigh wrote a piece and also did a nice interview yesterday on SEN about him being, Geelong's cricketer as well, which I thought was a nice touch there about, an era when cricketers felt accessible and more representative of the communities they came from, whereas now it's just different. And that's fine. I'm not saying it's better or worse. It's just different to how it used to be in that era.
Yeah, I wish we'd interviewed him now.
We've done a good job.
I suppose there are a lot of interviews with him, but it would have been something just to have a conversation, later in his life, looking back on it.
It has got me thinking about some players we probably should think about speaking to now that they're into their 70s and 80s for the reasons that you say. There are a whole stack of them that played around that time that have stories to tell, and that's what we like doing it. I mean, we mentioned this briefly on Storytime yesterday, but Ian Redpath passing away. The week started for us with all of the Philip Hughes tributes on the 27th of November, when it was exactly 10 years from when he passed away. As I said again on Storytime, I found myself sitting up kind of all night watching all of that and taking all of that in, and what a joy it was watching him bat again in totality with those minis that KO put up of the twin hundreds, and his century on one day debut at the MCG. But the twin hundreds especially, it's not that he was batting in a cavalier fashion. If you look at the numbers and look at the analysis of the day, it's not like his strike rate was in the 80s or 90s or anything like that. But boy, when he hit the ball, fuck me, he was such a gifted, precocious talent, and to watch him so joyously bring up those hundreds, and the way that the Australians, the way Mike Hussey bowed to him out there when the second one was brought up, the way Ricky Ponting's through the window at the Durban dressing room going absolutely nuts, and on the other side of it, seeing the SCG silent again as it was 10 years ago. Sean Abbott playing in that first class fixture against South Australia,
playing on that day.
Sorry, not South Australia, Tasmania. My apologies. Last week, but of course, having been front and centre of that 10 years ago, and that was very moving. Watching him being back there and playing cricket on that day, 10 years on.
Yeah, and I mean, I can't imagine the number of things that go through his head all the time. Every year around this time, of course, but this year even more so. And then the news that they're bringing him into the Test squad for the Adelaide game. That in itself seems like a really tough thing, a difficult time to be brought into a Test squad. Now, he's probably not going to play. He's there as a support player, but there are so many other squads that he could have been part of over the years that he hasn't. It seems almost unfair to make it be this one where there'd be so much loading on it, given the Adelaide Test of 10 years ago being the test against India, the tribute test to Philip Hughes. Yeah,
I mean, he has been in Test squads before, but as you say, hasn't had the chance to play.
Often.
Yeah, he's been periodically called up into squads most recently.
He's an occasional tour party member rather than that sort of Nisa Boland, there for years at a time kind of squad player.
He was brought up in, I think, 2023 for the Oval Test match. He was brought up as a reserve, but there's so much to take from this, and my impression is that with time, this hasn't got easier to appreciate or understand. No. With time, it's actually probably gotten even worse, because the very idea of him still playing now and, knowing what might have happened, that's just the cricket piece, right? But, what a loss he was to his family. And the documentary that's coming out in a couple of days that CA has done in a co-production with Channel 7 and Foxtel, I believe, and all the other written tributes, again, referring to Gideon's piece about the match officials that day, which is absolutely harrowing at times, the way in which they made well, they didn't make anything happen, but the way in which they tried to keep some sense of order when there was complete chaos around, and as it was described, like they were effectively the first responders, right?
Yeah.
That's how the piece was titled. So, yeah, I mean, I know we talked about this briefly last week, but it felt right to just acknowledge again that was a significant thing that happened during the week, and this week in Adelaide will be another chance to reflect on all of this.
Yes, and may temper the coverage a bit with some of the papers and so on getting very stuck into the Australian team a week or so ago, but they might have to rethink that slightly this week.
I think they wound that back. My view is that was full on for about
2 days.
The day 3, from Stumps day 3 to about day 5, so day after the Test match, and then things just got into a more natural rhythm. They've been served well by the long break. Typically, Tests 1 and 2 of a summer are played back to back. This year, it's been set up in a different configuration. There was that brilliant West Australian back page, The Holiday, which was the play on the Kate Winslet, Cameron Diaz film with when they said they weren't going to regroup straight after the Test match. They were going to have their break and all the rest of it. I got a fairly punchy text message from someone within Cricket Australia to tell me, no, they're not on holiday. They're all training today. They're back at work. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Like, no dramas. Do what you need to do. But, I mean, it was clear that they were going to have that leave nevertheless. The one thing that was missed in the back page was probably like having some sort of photoshopping of, Kate Winslet in there. However, as Anna Forsyth, one of our great supporters, pointed out, Pat Cummins is Jude Law. So,
right.
They didn't need to Photoshop Jude Law in when Pat Cummins was already in the graphic.
They might need to dye the hair a little bit. Jude Law did a fair bit of work as a blonde.
Right. Not sure who's Jack Black in this equation, though. Maybe Travis Head?
It could be.
Yeah, I can see that.
The giant moustache. Maybe after he's retired, he could. Travis Head. He's one of those ones who could blow out pretty quick if he's not on the training track, I think.
So Cummins was playing golf on the weekend and posting about it. So they had a breather, and fair enough. Like, they're allowed to do that. It's their downtime or whatever else. But by the time they'd regrouped, we knew there were going to be changes to the squad. Yep. So, Geoff, this is the third time in 4 seasons that Hazelwood's picked up an injury right at the start of the summer. I know you
about
tend
3
to be,
of them have been side strains.
Yeah, and you tend to be quite cynical about the the minor side strain, because often minor becomes major before our very eyes, and that would be deeply disappointing for Hazelwood, who's had the best 12 months of his career statistically and didn't lower his colours in Perth. He bowled superbly on day 1, and I thought he bowled really well in really tough conditions on the third day as well, when all was going to shit.
Yep.
So Hazelwood missing, which feels big. So it's a bit of a reverse from where we were before Perth, when it was India having to work out what was going on with replacements and less experienced players, in Australia being very settled. Well, now India can bring back Rohit Sharma. They have, I guess, a good problem with Shubman Gill, which we'll come to in a moment. And Hazelwood's going to be replaced by either Boland, which seems inevitable, or Brendan Doggett, or the aforementioned Sean Abbott. Brendan Doggett hit top form at the right time. Feels right to pick him,
Big dog.
He's been rewarded.
He's someone who has been floating around for such a long time. He was on the Indigenous tour to England in 2018, the 150th anniversary tour, and was starting to sort of make more of a name in the Big Bash around that time, that sort of thing as well. So he was kind of fringe, but being looked at because tall bashes the deck, that kind of thing. But he's, this is still a pretty steep rise to suddenly be in Test contention after being name-checked by Andrew McDonald in the press conference after the Test, saying that he was somebody who'd impressed them in the Australia A game. And really, it seems, on the back of that performance, has got himself into consideration. Yeah,
the 6-for to start the Australia. It's about timing your run at this time of the season, and, getting a 6-for against India A. Then and then a 5-for last week in Shield cricket. So, good on him for getting his chance. It works for batters, so it should work for bowlers as well. The same applies to Abbott, by the way. His wickets are at 18 this season. He's had a 7-wicket match and a 6-wicket match. I mean, it's the procedural fairness thing that I think works for both of them. With Doggett, quiz question. What was... I didn't even realise this, by the way. I've forgotten. What was the one Test squad that he was in?
One Test squad. Was he... 2019 Ashes, he wasn't floating around, was he?
Not quite.
Around then?
It's the kind of era. We were there.
He wasn't in Sri Lanka.
He was in the UAE in 2018.
UAE.
I did not remember that at all. With Michael Nisa, who was impressing as the net bowler and nearly played.
Yep.
When they brought back Peter Siddle to play a couple of tests in that series as well.
But they weren't picking quicks really, because they had John Holland and Lyon bowling together.
That's right. So that was the Doggett story during the week.
Siddle and Stark?
Siddle and Stark, yeah. Stark ended up fielding first slip in the second game, you might remember, at Abu Dhabi, which felt like it went for days and days and days. So Boland's likely to play. We saw in that first spell in the truncated PM's 11 game, they should have played that as a declaration game in hindsight, because they first things first, when India passed the score, they just kept batting anyway.
Yep.
So they should have played it like a one-day declaration game and let India bat first and declare, and let Australia bat second, or some version of that. In the end, it was a maximum of 10 overs per bowler, about 15 players played in each team. It was a bit of a farce. But having been washed out on day one, they wanted to get some cricket in. Sam Constas made a quick 100. I mean, had he made a quick 100 against India A month ago, he's probably playing Test cricket right now. That was the real quiz for him. It was those India A matches, if you could follow his Shield form into that, but that wasn't so. But just a timely reminder that he's there on the shelf if they do end up having another bad Test match, I guess, and there is calls for heads to roll and that type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you couldn't say, if Nathan McSweeney has one or two more like he's had in the first one, you couldn't see him batting through 5 tests, not making any. He's got to make a score at some point.
He'll need a score. But Boland bowling, his first spell was none for 1 from 4 against Jaiswal and Rahul, who are going to be the Test openers unless Rohit goes to the top and Rahul shuffles down. We'll talk more about that on our preview show in a couple of days. But, Boland, it might be his last hurrah as a Test cricketer, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like we're heading into a bit of a generational change time, which makes sense given the age profile of the team.
Yeah.
So Boland right now, it might well be that he's still floating around next summer for England. Who
bring him back to spook England again.
But he's played 6 Test matches at home and taken his wickets at 12.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that he gets the next opportunity with Hazelwood missing. But it's a big moment in Boland's career, knowing that he won't have many more opportunities, and it's the first time he's played a Test match since Leeds in 2013.
Daniel Brettig in a box, reporting that Todd Greenberg, the boss of the union, is going to be the next CEO of Cricket Australia. It's not official yet, it's not formal yet, but if Brettig in a box says so, I tend to believe it.
It's formal.
Is it?
Yeah, it's
They've
definitely
formalised it
happening. Yeah, okay. I've since spoken to people. It's done. So
yes, but they haven't publicly announced.
Oh no, sorry, they're not. They're announcing it this week.
That's what I'm saying.
There's no. Yeah, the decision itself, the board meeting. I did some journalism yesterday.
Yeah, made some calls.
I made some
you
calls.
Okay? Did you
I truly
down?
did. I know. So Greenberg is taking over.
I don't make a call to get a pizza now. I'm like, thank God,
I trusted Dan. It wasn't anything about that. It was more like I wanted to talk about it today, and I wanted to be able to say with authority that Greenberg's taking over.
Sure.
I think this is a terrific opportunity for CA to rebrand a little bit, because they've talked a lot, Geoff, and you've been there in these chats with me, both publicly and privately, about wanting to be better global citizens, and there have been nods to that. In the Baird Hockley period in charge, they have done things that have been impressive. From a low base after that South Africa series was cancelled in early 21 when Hockley was the acting CEO, and there were myriad challenges there, and it didn't look good. It was a bad time for CA to give the impression they were basically doing over one of their fellow full members. But, since then, returning to Pakistan and other bits and pieces along the way. But Greenberg has been really honest about his appraisal of where global cricket is at the moment, and the direction of travel with short-form cricket and IPL franchise conglomerates taking over global cricket, and the challenges that are lying within all of that for international cricket.
Yep.
Here's a chance for an administrator to really walk the talk, big time. And he's articulate, and he's clearly clever. He's bloody experienced in that job at the NRL. He had every possible scandal. Because that's, I guess, the way that rugby league is. There's so much going on off the field, or indeed on the field, that you need a CEO who's constantly ready to crisis manage. Don't think it'll be quite as much of that with cricket, but I'm buoyant about this. I feel like this could be a really interesting time in the history of Cricket Australia, with, at the same time that we know in the next 5 years global cricket is going to radically morph into something different. That's how it feels anyway.
I'll be interested to get him on the show and put some questions to him early, at the very start of the tenure, to go what are the plans, and see what kind of commitments there are and how firm those commitments are. As someone who's gone from leading a sport to leading a players' union and back to leading a sport again, it is an odd sort of jump in a way, because the union and Cricket Australia have been so oppositional at times, and they have worked together much more closely while he's been at the ACA, but I'll be curious to see how that pans out.
They got the pay deal done without any real rancor.
No,
he was able to do the bit where like last time around, there was so much animosity they couldn't do that bit, whereas this time they did. He won the global hunt, blah, blah, blah. There was one overseas candidate and one domestic candidate, and Todd Greenberg, and he won out in the last round of interviews. So there was a competitive process, and I think he was always being groomed for this, let's be honest.
Yeah,
already,
it was being talked about some years ago. Let's get to the WBBL final. Before the break, a Melbourne side won the Women's Big Bash League. The Renegades have done it. They hadn't made a final before. They had that semi-final. They should have made the final a few years ago when they were they had that last ball. They needed 3 off the last ball. I think it's one of my all-time favourite finishes to a cricket match. It's just such a brilliant sequence of bits of fielding with Sarah Ailey on the boundary, throwing into Healy, the glove off, pinging down the stumps, going to a super over, winning that, and that's something that hurt that Renegades side a lot because they should have made it to that final and didn't. The Stars made one final in 2020, but broadly speaking, the Melbourne teams have been shit-ass in the WBBL in terms of actually pushing to the decider. So they made the decider. They had that odd sort of final setup where 3 plays 4 and then 2 plays 3, and you've got to wait for those games to happen. So it's interesting that there was all this talk about this final setup as it's not fair to finish top of the table and then get knocked out after only one chance, right? In a traditional semi-final structure, but you still get knocked out after only one loss. If you finish top, you just go straight to the final, though.
I have no idea why in a Final Four system we aren't using the McIntyre Final Four.
1 plays 2.
1 plays 2, 3 plays 4, and you get your double chance there,
Sure.
and you go straight through to the granny, and you get to play a game.
Yeah.
Anyway, they decided to, I guess it's to have one fewer game, right? To squeeze the season a little bit. They were trying to reduce the number of games across the board, so this was an example of that, and they get to make the finals happen quicker. So there was the knockout and the challenger during the week. The Thunder won by 6 wickets over the Hurricanes, with Phoebe Litchfield top scoring with 46. The Thunder captain knocking off the side that had Elise Villani in it, who's been such a gun for the Hurricanes since moving over there. Then in the Challenger, the Thunder...
Doesn't make runners in finals, though.
The Thunder played... It made 100 in the WNCL final a couple of years ago.
Most of them. Check the career.
She made 100 in both finals.
Check the career record.
Did she make 100 in both the WNCL finals?
She's played in a lot of domestic finals and very rarely made a score.
So the Thunder... 100 in the finals is rare. Thunder against the Heat. Thunder in the Challenger, this is effectively the prelim, got 7 for 133. Hannah Darlington, 49 out. Then the Heat absolutely cruised it. So coming from second spot, so it was first versus second. Georgia Redmayne, the doctor, 50 not out from 41 balls to win in just 15.2 overs by 9 wickets. So it was set up beautifully, and they get the chance to play at the G, which is not that usual in the WBBL. We had the AFLW Grand Final the night before at Princes Park, which we were talking a little bit about yesterday. That was a sellout. 6,000 at the G. I guess that's difficult to make an assessment on. There might have been an argument for playing it at the Junction Oval, but the other side of it is, do you earn the right to play at the prestige venue, even if it is sort of 5% full? Maybe you do. I don't really know what I think.
They do, but gut feeling is that the WBBL's lost momentum the last couple of years. I think it really hasn't helped having it clash with ICC tournaments the last couple of autumns as well, or springs as well, where it's been, we had the 50-over World Cup overlapping it last year. There was a 20-over World Cup the year before that were on at broadly the same time, and so that just sucked airtime and energy. So, the idea of the standalone window seems like a good idea initially, but there's always an ICC tournament on at that time of year now. That's where they're putting them all to avoid the IPL and time them around other things, because you can do an October tournament in the Southern Hemisphere, or you can do an October tournament in the subcontinent, and you can make that work both ways, and that tends to be the ICC gap. So I think the WBBL's suffering from that.
They could theoretically line it back up with the men. And look, these things go in and out of fashion. Now, you think about double headers, right? Probably 5 years ago, you and I would have said double headers are a problem because they diminish the women's game. They make it look like a curtain raiser. But the way it's working in the 100 has been extremely successful, where the crowds have swelled to beyond 10,000 regularly to games at test venues, and that experience I expect would be far more beneficial than having a couple of thousand people at a lower profile ground. I'm not sure where it sits exactly, but look, 6,000, it's more about I think anyway, the chance to play at the MCG, and you earn the right to play in the same way that if you're a football team making a lower level cup final, even with 10,000 supporters, you win the chance to go to Wembley, if that makes sense.
So basically, the Renegades win it on the back of Hayley Matthews, as it has been through the season. But yeah, well, you say as ever, but there's this assumption that Hayley Matthews, she's a gun. Won a T20 World Cup in 2016, is one of those top players. But she just hasn't been for the intervening years. She's really come good in the last couple of years. So she makes that 66 in the World Cup final when she's 18 years old, and then she's really poor for years for West Indies. She barely makes a score in T20 cricket for 6 years after that for West Indies through until about 2022. Starts making a couple of half centuries around then, and then really doesn't finally actually gets going during that World Cup in South Africa in late 2023. That's when she starts making consistent runs, and then towels up Ireland at home, and then comes out here to play Australia about a year ago and smashes them, makes 100 in one
Player
game.
Of the series in a losing effort.
Yeah, exactly. Just runs the board in every game, makes runs in just about every start, and sort of starts being talked about as this star, as though she's always been this star, but actually wasn't. It took a long time to deliver. So the Super League, when that was the Super League, never made runs in the Super League. Started doing okay in the 100 because that's only been the last couple of seasons. The Women's IPL, the last 2 seasons, she'd made runs because that's been recent. The Big Bash, this is amazing, really, and I sort of knew this on gut, but going back and looking at the numbers really makes it stand out. This was her 8th season in the Big Bash. Mm-hmm. Before this season, she'd never made more than 300 runs in a season. Most of her seasons, she'd averaged less than 20, and she'd made 1 half century in 7 seasons in the Big Bash. And she kept getting bought because people are like, Hayley Matthews, she's a good player.
Yeah.
But she kept not delivering. 150 in 7 seasons and keeps being bought as an overseas player. And then this year, 350s in the year, including the one in the final, top 300 runs, averages 40, and makes 324 runs in 10 innings rather than 14. Most of the years she's had 14 innings and still made 150, 200, 250 runs. So really broke out this year in the WBBL and had her first decisive Big Bash campaign, to the point of making these runs in the final when they're stuffed without her because the top order wickets start falling early. And then she gets a bit of help from Georgia Wareham, makes 21. And Naomi Stalenberg, the most Naomi Stalenberg sort of innings, 16 off 12. It's very Stalenberg, come out, score quickly for a bit and then hole out. But that was enough because Matthews is going nuts at the other end, smashing him through cover, over cover point, going down the ground. She's picking up the ball everywhere and finding the boundary and just pushing that score along and ended up getting them up to 139. She got out with a couple of balls to go and they made 141.
Never easy with the threat of rain as well when you're batting first, not really knowing what Duckworth-Lewis might do, and that plays a role as well. So that
the Waikiki formula, I believe formula,
you mean. Indeed. And just with Matthews as well, we saw at the T20 World Cup this year in what was a quasi-elimination game against England. So I guess it's a reputation that's evolving, and I think I'd be right in saying the WPL was the same as well, the Women's IPL, where she's had a couple of big games in where it's really mattered. So it's nice to have a reputation as a big game player, in coming back to footy terms, like born to play in September kind of thing, except in her case, born to play in the Eliminator, or whatever this was called. This was the final, sorry.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so it was an interesting innings. It was push and pull. So when Stalenberg gets out, they're 5 for 109, 5 overs to go, and Matthews keeps pushing that, gets them up to that 141, and that gets them enough when the Waikiki comes into play in the second innings because they take a couple of wickets early as well. So, Heat relying heavily on Grace Harris to score quickly and Jemima Rodrigues to kind of pace the innings. They're both out. 0-1 they make. Charis Becker, that player we talked about who came in and took 4 for a few weeks ago from grade cricket, she bowls, gets Harris out. Only bowled the one over, but took that important wicket. Millie Illingworth, I love that there's an Illingworth running around in cricket again, and Millie Illy, can't go past that. She's the one who gets Rodrigues out.
I think Maxie had a bit to do with her as well. I think he might have done some coaching with her.
Right, and then with then the rain comes, takes off 8 overs, sets them 98 to get off 12, and they're in the 4th over at that point. And Sophie Molyneux comes back and gets the doctor, gets Georgia Redmayne out for 16. So it's all on Laura Harris, who still hits the biggest sixes in the WBBL. Bowled, first ball. Who's bowling? Hayley Matthews, of course she is. Yeah. So gets her out for naught, and that's pretty much it at 5 for 37. Jess Jonathan does her best, makes 44 quickly off 20-odd balls, but they needed 19 off the last over, and JJ tried valiantly. Still a pretty handy player, Australia, if you're looking around, someone who could make 44 off 20 and nearly win the game. So they ended up falling short by 7 runs, so a close result with Waikiki formula shifting the target around.
Yeah, so 10 years on, or 10 seasons on rather, the first Victorian team to win the WBBL. Yeah, they've had some. They've been the more consistent by some margin of the two Victorian teams in the women's game. So that's a great thing. And acknowledging too that the pool of players that all the teams had to draw from at the very end of the season was depleted because England's women and South Africa's women were playing.
Yep.
I know there's always compromises with scheduling, but that won't be happening for much longer because, as we discussed on the program a couple of weeks ago, the women, I don't know if you were with us, it might have been easier than me, the women's FTP has made sure that won't happen anymore.
Okay, there's a window there.
So we'll now be in a situation where the finals at the very end, you won't end up with different types of teams taking the field. Geoff, I think we should
Maurice Blackburn.
Take a break before we do that. We'll tell you about Maurice Blackburn. I thought you did a nice job of it yesterday. Australia's #1 plaintiff law firm. Some of the best and brightest lawyers in the country on your side. As I mentioned on Storytime, I met a few of them last week when I've been here in Melbourne, and it was an absolute delight to know that we are capturing the essence of what they do, which is standing up for working people and making the legal system affordable. So much of what they do is no win, no fee. That means that you can go to one of their 30 offices or get in touch with them, confident that they will do the right thing by you, as they've been doing since 1919 when they first came into operation. We spend a lot of time talking about cricket of the interwar period and how weird the world was immediately after World War One. Well, Maurice Blackburn Lawyers saw fit to start.
The double 19s.
To start doing as
the double R's and the double D's.
To start doing as they do. So we've got all their information in our show notes if you need legal support. We're really happy when we are able to align ourselves with a partner commercially that feels like that, and Maurice Blackburn, even within a month, very much feels like that to me. So if you are in need of legal support, do feel free, not just feel free, we encourage you to take a look in the show notes, click the link to them and have a chat to them and do the thing you need to do.
Get on the blower. We'll be back in just a second.